Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chaiyya Chats. My name is Ruben Thomas, and I'm very happy to have with us Reverend Father Matt Alexander. Mattachin, it's good to have you back.
Great to be back.
Good to have you here. It's been a while since we've had you on this podcast, but I'm very excited about the topic that we're talking about. For many of our listeners, many of the recent topics that we've been covering, we usually end it with, you should talk to your spiritual father about this subject. And a lot of the issues that we have in our spiritual lives, we put an emphasis on having a spiritual father relationship. So this podcast is really to dive into what does that really mean? What does it mean to have a spiritual father relationship? So Achin, just to start off, what is a spiritual father and how do you go about finding one and starting that relationship?
A spiritual father fundamentally is, we have our parents are there for us to guide us, to help us, and to teach us, and to help us to grow. We've been entrusted to our parents by God, and in a similar manner, we hear Paul talk about this in Corinthians, where he considers those that he preached the gospel to his spiritual children. And he reminds them of that he is a father to them in the sense of the gospel, having brought them being born again in the gospel from him. And this is what we see as well, that, a spiritual father is somebody whom God has entrusted you to his care. The priest serves in a sacramental role, but also in a spiritual father role for the parish, to care for, to love people and to reflect the love of God the Father towards the people, to deliver that, to care about them, to guide them, to help them to tangibly be a part of their life. And that role is a spiritual father.
I mean, talking about being a spiritual father for that parish, I guess you would say like it's always better to start young, but it's also never too late to start that relationship, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's something that, actually, we may not always take advantage of the resources that we have, or maybe we're not raised in those things for some time, but it's never too late. One of those things you just come and just talk. That, the basic thing is you're not alone in your struggle. You're not alone in the things that you go through. You have somebody to be there. You have many people. You have the whole parish. You have mentors, you have, people who care about you. You have godparent, you have a godfather or godmother, and, we're all in this together. But then you come and in a unique way, you come to your parish priest and you confess your sins to them, and they offer God's forgiveness to you. You confess for God, but they stand as a witness there and to receive you to the kingdom, to deliver you the forgiveness of God, and especially over time, that's a relationship that you have, that this is the person who's coming and binding your wounds, and healing them and helping you to walk, and making sure that you're not taking on too much. Sometimes we get so motivated to go all out and just temper that growth, and to help it to grow, your spiritual growth to go steadily towards the kingdom.
And I like how, the different ways that you're describing what a spiritual father does. It's almost as if they wear many hats sometimes, as, they are a father confessor. They're your spiritual mentor, your spiritual guide, your counselor at times, right? When you're in time of need, right? So there are many different ways that spiritual father can impact you in your life.
Yeah, for sure. There's many, they lead by, God willing, they lead by example. They can provide a good example. They can provide good mentorship. They can provide guidance, help, like you said, counsel, sometimes just advice. And that's the ideal situation, is to be able to have somebody that you can go to and to talk to be part of that. I know in my life, I may not have always taken advantage of those at a younger age, but as I started to, I realized the value of what a spiritual father can be. That, sometimes you get stuck in these cycles of sin, or keep falling back into things, and really, breaking that cycle for me a lot of times, most every time, was actually through the sacrament of confession, and breaking through and seeing things from a different perspective, because I brought that and said it out loud, instead of keeping everything in my mind and my heart, bringing it out and saying it out loud to my spiritual father, whether it be in confession or sometimes just in asking advice and things like that as well. And I've had different people who've served different roles in that as well, to be able to guide me, to help me. Wonderful spiritual fathers who've cared a lot about me and my growth.
And I think, some of the questions that I've heard before, it's really basic of how do I even find one, in the sense of, is it supposed to be my parish priest, or is it supposed to be, someone else? And then for the youth today, there might be more of inclination to go towards the younger clergy. And for most people, if their parish priest is older, they might not even look towards that resource at times, even though that is right there for them. So what would you say in those types of situations?
Yeah, ideally you want to go to confession with your parish priest. They know you, you regularly see them, you have access to them on a regular basis. That's the ideal situation, the most recommended situation. Some of the other traditions, you have people who tend to go to the monasteries, and I understand that that's part of it. But I think that the ideal situation, what we should be doing, is going to your parish priest, and it doesn't matter their age. But sometimes older people have a tough time going to a younger person. Sometimes younger people may have a tough time going to an older person. It's been my experience personally that all the advice I've gotten, every sacrament, every confession has just been a wonderfully liberating experience for me, and incredible and different at times. But sometimes I haven't been able to get to my spiritual father, and therefore I've gone to confession with somebody who's there and available, who also serves as a mentor for me. And what I'm saying is, especially even the older generation priests have given me such wonderful advice and counsel and help and healing the wounds and things like that as well. I know sometimes communication can be tough. It might be hard for somebody who's more comfortable in my to come to confession with somebody like me, and I can understand that. But at the same time, I know sometimes that the opposite is also true. So, but I really, we don't want to pick and choose always either, right? The ideal situation is, your parish priest loves you, cares about you. If you go to them, God willing, they're all good-hearted people, and they want the best for you. So I think that going to confession with them would be the ideal situation, or priest, at least in the local area, that you can.
And sort of going into what those roles in that relationship looks like, at least from the side of the lay person, right? Of what that role should look like. There's always a question of how often should I go to that priest for confession, and in general, what is that we are supposed to talk to them about? Is it just a confession? Is that the only time that we talk to them is during confession, or do we have them as a regular part of our lives? And what do you think is the best way for that relationship?
Ideally, as a part of your life. That's something that you want them to be in. Part of confession is confession. You're coming in, confessing the sins, and rejecting them and turning away from them and turning back towards God. And there is a little bit of counsel that might be in there, but it's not counseling in and of itself. And that's not the purpose of it. There is an instructive to it. Sometimes, if you're just, having a tough day, you want to be able to just text or call your spiritual father and ask them to pray for you. That's, it's something that I know every priest in this diocese would be happy to pray for anybody that somebody, called upon them to do. And so it's a regular thing, any major moments or struggles that you're having, things that have to do with, I love it when my spiritual children talk to me about, they're looking for a job, or they're considering a career change, or things like that. These are things that I want to be involved in. I mean, just hear about, and as you talk it out, maybe, you can process some of the things that you say as well. So we want to be involved, right? As, every father wants to be involved in the life of their child. We want to be involved in the whole, and in what you're going through.
And I think that's a great point that you said, is that you as a spiritual father and as a priest, you love to see what goes on in the life of your spiritual children. And even from the perspective of a layperson, when you get into college, when you figure out what degree you're getting, if you get a job, when you get into a relationship with someone, those are things that you almost take joy in telling your spiritual father about, because that's someone, if you've built up that relationship, it's almost like a close person in your life that is always looking out for you. And I think that only helps you when you know that there's someone always there for you.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I think it'll help you too as well. Like, if there's something that you feel, difficulty about, and things like sharing and things, it helps to say it, to hear another perspective, instead of keeping things just inside. When people struggle, you want to know. And the very minimum we can do is pray. Not that that's a minimum. Praying is a major part of it. Is an incredible, bringing these things before God. What I'm saying is just, you're not alone in your struggle. You're not alone in your journey.
And going into more of the from the perspective of a priest, Achin, I know that every spiritual father does things a different way. in what is best for their own spiritual children. But do you sort of see it as where you are constantly advising on every detail of someone's life, or how do you go about that relationship from your end?
So from my perspective, and it might be different, but as far as I understand the role is of a spiritual father, and the same way I also view my children in a certain sense as well. My goal is for them to grow into healthy, functioning adults. As a youth minister, that's my role as well. I want people to grow. As a priest, I want people to grow into. It's not for me to make all their decisions for them, because then there's no growth in that. The goal is for them to be able to make good decisions, healthy, that build them up. And in the process of that, they might make mistakes. That's part of it. And that risk is there, and we have to allow for that people do make mistakes. Sometimes people don't take advice. And the goal is to just help them to kind of be rooted, and that even when they make the mistake, that they can get back up and come back towards God. To do that as well. So it's the role as a spiritual father is not to dictate, as the role of a parent isn't as well. Maybe at a younger age you need more guidance. You might need a little bit more in that sense. But then over time to be able to build that up, to help people to make good, healthy, wonderful decisions.
Diving into that relationship a little bit more, looking at different struggles that might happen, like as we're talking about this being a campus ministry initiative, a lot of times our students may go off to college away from home, and they're not always coming back if they're traveling long distance. And I think we kind of get the question of, is it okay then to have more than one spiritual father if you're not able to come back home and talk to your regular one? And how do you keep that relationship going even when you're away from home?
Yeah, for some people, and this might be a situation where there might be differences of opinion. For me, and for my personal belief, I think it's okay to be able to, especially when you're in a different city or things like that, that you should seek somebody who is, like, there's an Orthodox parish local that you can be a part of regularly and such, but not to lose touch with your spiritual father back home either, but to be a part of this, right? I don't think that there's anything wrong with kind of engaging in this. You get the idea, and having this multiple people as mentors in your life and things like that. But nevertheless, when we technologically we have an ability nowadays to keep in touch in so many ways. We're learning that in quarantine, especially, that we can use creative means to be able to keep in touch with people. So do make every effort that you can, but you're going to also need the sacrament of confession. And so I would highly recommend that if you're out of town or if you're in a place, to find a father of confession who is local that you can go to regularly and such, unless you're going back home regularly and you're able to do that and maintain that with your confessor father back in your home parish.
And I think one of the other struggles that may arise out of this relationship is the chance that a priest is as in charge of a parish or an area. There are a lot of different responsibilities that they have, and it may seem sometimes to a person that their priest is too busy for them, or they're not communicating enough. And even if you talk about in a church setting, as children grow up and start to take their spiritual life more seriously, they start to reach out to have a spiritual father, and you end up just having more spiritual children come into the fold. And I think for a single individual, if they don't feel like the priest is communicating with them as often, or that they're too busy, they couldn't feel like some feelings of neglect, or that, oh, Achin doesn't really, he seems to have forgotten about me. And that's not saying that's what Achin is feeling, but at least from personal experience and what other people feel like, especially when you're a priest of a bigger parish or area. And Achin, this, being the youth minister of Dallas, just how hard it can be to minister to everyone in that area. How do you deal with that struggle?
Yeah, sometimes it's tough. Sometimes it can be, we get so overwhelmed. Priests tend to take on too much. And not only that, parishes and stuff, there tend to be, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few, right? That we tend to have a priests who just have so much on their plate especially when it comes to parish life, especially when it comes to all the different things that are happening in the parish. Plus, I can understand why people would feel, they wish their parish priest would be more proactive. I think part of it is just be compassionate, be loving towards your priest as well. That that they're doing the best that they can. They're trying. Most parish priests work really really hard just to kind of, and they're just doing the best that they can. And as you, in a spirit of love, they love you and you love them, and just be patient with them and understanding. And sometimes you might have to reach out to them a lot, and I get, as opposed to, and they versus them reaching out to you and such, but just to keep doing that, keep coming, and they don't feel bad that that you're a burden upon them. They would love to hear. We would love to hear from everybody that want to know how you're doing. So it's a good thing to be able to reach out, just to understand that sometimes, I mean, it is hard. I'm not justifying it, but just forgive us in our weakness. That's all.
I think that's a good point for the listeners to realize too, is that the priests are not communicating or not communicating to you on purpose or anything. Just with how busy everyone gets, it is hard to keep track of everyone consistently, regularly. I think it'd be good to also recognize that when you have that relationship with a spiritual father, when you suffer in anything, they also feel to a certain level the same thing, right? Because they see you suffering and they also feel that pain and that sadness. So even when you're struggling in this relationship, I think most spiritual fathers would want to do right by their spiritual children as much as they can. So I know it's easy to think that, man, Hutchin's not texting me as often. I don't get to talk to him. I haven't seen him in forever. And I just want to recognize that it's not out of any malicious intent or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't mean that he still cares for you. It's just and we have that situation. It arises with family members and things like that. You have that situation with like very good friends as well. That sometimes you may not talk to them for a little while, but when you do, everything is just back like it was. And that's sometimes like a beautiful and wonderful feeling. There are people in your life that you always have that kind of like a deep relationship with.
And I'll say this too, as just a little tip for anyone. If I really need to talk to my spiritual father, I'll just text them and say it's really urgent. And usually that gets a response, even if it may not be a 911 emergency. If I really need to get through, I'll say, hey, Hutchin, it's really urgent. Can we talk? And usually that gets through. So any tip out there for anyone who really needs to talk, just be consistent.
Be very direct. As opposed to having to read between the lines. That would be super, super helpful. I have a very difficult time sometimes reading between the lines and understanding.
And one of the last struggles that we want to talk about today, Hutchin, is what to do when you lose a spiritual father, whether if it is because that they passed away, or even in our church with the transfer system that we have, when Hutchins leave your church. What are the struggles that you see coming out of that, and how do you cope with it?
Yeah, recently in our diocese, we lost one of our priests, Father Daniel George, a very wonderful spiritual father to so many people in the Chicago area, and especially at the Bellwood Parish. And I saw his spiritual children, coming and saying, just in full force, coming out to honor Hutchin and for his years and years of ministry. It's been hard amidst the quarantine for them to be able to express that love, the love that he expressed to them, and when they had needs and difficulties. And so, part of it is that was evidence of spiritual fatherhood done right. That Daniel George Hutchin is a wonderful example of a shepherd who cared for his flock, who loved them, was there for them. Over a period for decades. And that's, there are people that he baptized and then did their weddings and then did their children's baptism. And that's the ideal. That's the Orthodox life. That's the way I believe that it was meant to be, that this is the relationship is there. I've seen I've seen a priest of a long time do more ministry with just one sentence, or a punch on the arm, or hi, how are you doing? Miss you at church. Because this person, it's not about language. It's not about being quote unquote dynamic. It's not about being anything. It's just about love, right? And so I've seen so many like true spiritual fathers to children and to people do so much ministry just by so little than what I do through like talking and talking and talking and speeches and this and that, right? Because the most important thing is that love, and that's the ideal situation, and that only happens when you have like a long-term pastor. We do have the situation where you have transfer priest. That is what is the system in India, and I'm not going to contradict that, but I personally don't think it is a healthy system to implement here in the American diocese. I think that the regular transfer priest, the thing that we lose the most is this spiritual fatherhood. This is the greatest loss is when we transfer priests on a regular basis is this lack of this relationship, and a relationship only happens over a period of years, many years, and we can never get there if we're transferring the priests over and over again. And so it's something that I feel very strongly about, and I've witnessed in my own life and in my own ministry, and watching people throughout this country that this is something there. Nevertheless, it does happen. Sometimes you lose a spiritual father for death or such, and God willing, I hope that the person who's coming into that situation as the next parish priest handles that well by respecting the person who was there before them, honoring them, and then also starting to build that relationship from the ground up with the people that they serve, step by step, and give the new person a chance as well, right? It's not going to be the same thing. It's not going to happen overnight, but at the same time, you just you do the best that we can. Right, the church is just trying to provide and to help, and so sometimes people have a negative experience with their priest because of things, and that breaks my heart too. But in a spirit of forgiveness and love, try to reconcile these things and to come to peace with one another. We have disagreements with our with people, with our family members all the time. We have disagreements with our earthly parents as well. We should, we have to learn to forgive. We have to learn to love. Nobody's perfect. The priest is not perfect. The priest is a sinner. The priest is just trying to grow, and we ask for your prayers all the time as well, because we make mistakes, and sometimes they're big mistakes, and sometimes it takes a lot of grace and forgiveness to give to us as well. But we have spiritual fathers, and we're all imperfect. We're all sinners, just journeying towards the kingdom together as well. It's not that any of us is beyond anything. We're all part of this entire thing.
And I'm glad that you brought that up here as we wrap it up, about this is also a two-way relationship. At no time is any one person perfect in what they're doing, but we go to a spiritual father in hope of that spiritual guidance. And we know communication is a two-way street, right? And, a lot of it is what you put into it, and that's what you get out of it sometimes. And like we said, when you have to deal with a new spiritual father, the years of trust and openness and honesty that you've built up with someone else, it might feel like you have to start over again. That can be tough. I like how you put it, is that the church provides the resources that she can for the spiritual benefit of her children. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up, Achin. Any last words on the spiritual father relationship and how we should really have that in our lives?
Thank you for asking me to speak on this. This is something that I care deeply about. I hope everybody has access to somebody that they can go to and to get advice from, and to build up that over time. It's a wonderful thing. I just want to reiterate that you're not alone. None of us are alone. We're all in this together. We're all just journeying towards the kingdom, encouraging one another. Sometimes we see the spiritual father leading us. Sometimes you see the spiritual father encouraging us and pushing us from behind to be able to encourage us. And it's not that it's not about becoming like us. It's about becoming like Christ, that we all might grow together towards the kingdom, be further refined. It's a beautiful and a wonderful thing. And I encourage everybody to take advantage of it. It's available to you. It's been a transforming thing in my own life, and a beautiful and wonderful thing. And I hope that everybody can have that as part of their spiritual journey as well.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you, Achin, so much for talking about this topic with us today. For anyone who's listening, if you ever need any help or would need any type of resources, feel free to reach out to us. Our information is in the description below. But for everyone listening, I hope you all continue to stay safe, and please stay tuned for another episode of Chaiyya Chats.